5 young men vanish in the dead of winter, leaving behind a trail of just impossible questions. For nearly half a century, we were fed a very specific narrative about their fate. It was a story of tragic, unavoidable misfortune. But what if everything we were told was a lie? What if this wasn't some terrible accident at all, but a targeted, violent crime that got completely swept under the rug? So, right out of the gate, we really have to ask ourselves a central question here. How exactly does a 45-year-old tragic accident suddenly become a covered-up homicide? It requires a massive paradigm shift. Because as you'll see, this wasn't just a failure of investigation. The evidence we're about to review suggests an active, decades-long effort to actually obscure the truth. We're going to break down the newly uncovered documents, the really chilling suspects, and the physical evidence that completely shatters the official story. Section 1. The official story shattered. For literally 45 years, the public police stance was unyielding. Authorities insisted these young men died of accidental freezing. They blamed the deaths on their own quote-unquote stupidity and said they simply got lost in the mountains. End of story, right? Well, in 2020, a staggering internal document from the Yuba County Sheriff's Office was uncovered. This internal memo quietly reclassified the case from an accident to foul play and homicide. So, behind closed doors, law enforcement knew exactly what this was: a deliberate, violent crime. And honestly, the sheer audacity of this cover-up is just breathtaking. There is a direct quote from that 2020 sheriff's memo that explicitly directs this. It is in the best interest of all parties involved that this letter is not sent to the Mathias family. I really want you to think about that. Law enforcement privately admits it's a homicide, but actually puts it in writing that the grieving family shouldn't be told. Why? Who exactly were they protecting? Let's look into that. Section 2, the violent brother-in-law. If this was a homicide, we absolutely need to look at the suspects, and the family's primary suspicion points directly to Gary Dale Whitley. He was the former brother-in-law to victim Gary Mathias. Now, at the time of the disappearance, Whitley was going through a remarkably bitter divorce with Gary's sister. But listen, this wasn't just a messy family dispute. Whitley was an incredibly violent man. He had a documented criminal record that included kidnapping and armed assault. Yet, despite his very clear proximity to the victims and this explosive background, he was never adequately questioned by the police during the initial investigation. Just look at the kind of danger Whitley posed. Shortly before the 5 men vanished, he delivered this incredibly chilling threat directly to Gary Mathias's mother. He told her, "You will know one day how it feels to lose a son." Let that truly sink in for a second. A known violent criminal with a history of kidnapping tells a mother she's going to lose her son. That son subsequently vanishes in a case later internally classified as foul play, and the police barely even investigate the guy. Moving on to Section 3, a deadly confession. Months after the bodies were discovered, a massive break in the case occurred. A man named Alan Martin, who was apparently overwhelmed by guilt, went directly to the Mathias family and confessed what he had witnessed. He claimed his group intercepted the young men on a bridge near Oroville Dam, and from there, it just escalated to horror. He said one attacker brutally beats Jackie Hewitt, literally just because he was whining. This prompts Gary Mathias to bravely step in and defend his friend. Then, Martin says a man named Glenn Baker takes control, force driving the victim's own car high up into the snowy mountain. There, the 5 men are forced out and left at gunpoint to die in the freezing cold. It is a brutal, calculated execution. But of course, justice was violently interrupted. Right after Martin confesses to the family, investigator Ayers prepares to officially interrogate him to get everything on the record. But just 2 days later, 2 days before police can officially question him, Alan Martin is found dead from a highly suspicious heroin overdose. The timing here is just impossibly convenient, isn't it? The one man willing to talk is suddenly silenced forever. Section 4. The Trailer Paradox. All right, this leads us to what is arguably the most haunting piece of evidence in this entire explainer. Ted Weher, one of the 5 men, actually didn't die immediately. He somehow managed to break into a Forest Service trailer and lived inside it for up to 3 months. Ultimately, he slowly passed away from starvation and the bitter cold. But the context of his death absolutely destroys the police's original accidental freezing theory. Just consider the impossible contradiction inside that trailer. Weher was surrounded by survival gear. We're talking a fully working gas heater, matches, and heavy, warm clothes. And get this, just outside, in a storage shed, there were literal tons of freeze-dried food, but none of it was touched. He froze to death next to a working heater, and starved to death feet away from an absolute mountain of food. This was not mere stupidity. This was absolutely not an accident. What this paints is a picture of horrific psychological terror. Ted didn't touch the food or light the fire, because doing so, striking a match, letting out smoke, opening a door, would have exposed his location. He was in a state of total cognitive paralysis from an outside threat. Additionally, Gary Mathias left his own shoes behind in that trailer, heavily suggesting that whoever was hunting them or holding them captive exerted direct external control over their every single move. They were completely terrified to survive, because survival meant discovery. Which leaves us with one incredibly chilling, lingering question. Were these men paralyzed by the terror of being hunted in those woods, or were they actively held captive in that trailer under agonizing threat? The internal police documents confirm it was foul play, yet the families were denied the truth for 45 years. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about the incredible weight of that silence and the horrific final days of 5 innocent men who deserve so much better than a decades-long cover-up. Keep questioning the official narrative, and thanks for joining me today.